The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. As you may have heard if you listened to or watched the regular show first, and I know not everybody does, you heard another voice here today. Jen Briney, host of Congressional Dish podcast, is here. You are going to be filling in tomorrow, which is very exciting for everybody involved. And I think the audience is going to, I think they're going to really enjoy it. It'll be a different type of show than when I do the show, which is the case every time we have a guest host. What is so you're going to talk a little bit about your podcast's approach first, and then what you have planned for tomorrow a little bit.
Sure. So my podcast is called Congressional Dish. And what I generally do is I laser focus onto Congress. And I started this about 5 years ago just because I knew that there were things that were being passed into law that we didn't know about. Mm-hmm. And so when I discovered that, I figured I wasn't afraid of the legislative language for whatever reason. I was like, this is something I could do. I could read the bills, the laws, tell you what's in them. I can watch the hearings because no one likes to sit through 6 hours of hearings, except for me. So that's what I do. And I do deep dives into what they're passing. And so what I have in store for you guys tomorrow is that we had the omnibus that was passed a couple weeks ago. This is funding the entire government 6 months late.
Right.
It was 2,232 pages. And obviously I haven't been able to read the whole thing yet, but I've read some significant portions. And so what I'm going to do is I'll tell you the story of how that became law, because that's fascinating in and of itself. And then some of the highlights or lowlights, as they may be, of what was snuck into law in this must-sign piece of legislation, because this had to be signed or else there was going to be another government shutdown.
Can you preview of the things that were in there that people probably did not hear about? What is sort of a weird, disturbing, or depraved thing that was included in that bill that made fewer headlines maybe?
That has to be the number one thing that I found so far is the Cloud Act, which essentially allows foreign governments to access our data in a way that is much easier than it would be now.
Data from social networks or data collected by governments like NSA? Oh, tech companies. Okay.
Yeah, from all tech companies. So I'll get into more detail in that tomorrow. I need my notes in front of me or else I'm going to not be sure about the facts. But yeah, the Cloud Act, that's a big one. And that was right at the end of the law. So you had to get through 2,200 pages to even know it was there. That one's a biggie. That one's really big. There was also some intelligence stuff that I'm concerned about.
I was going to ask,
some intelligence things. I mean, okay, spoiler alert. Essentially, what I think they did is they're allowing the intelligence agencies to do whatever they want for the next 6 months or until they pass an intelligence authorization, because they haven't passed it yet. And so there were provisions in this law, but one in particular that essentially allows money appropriated for intelligence to be used for whatever until they pass this new law, which I don't even know if it's coming now that they have this authorization. Why would they?
Yeah, it's unclear that that is going to happen.
Yeah.
As far as so there's this phrase that, or not phrase, but there's this idea that because of all the Trump craziness that's happening at the top level, a ton of stuff is happening below that Congress is doing that people aren't paying attention to, and that it's really bad. Aside from the media coverage of it, do you think that more, quote, crazy stuff is actually being passed now than in other times, or is it just that it's getting less attention?
Oh, there's definitely more now. And the reason is, well, first of all, I've been doing this for 5 years, so I can't say historically.
In the last 5 years, though?
Yes, because President Obama had the veto pen.
Right.
So the crazy stuff, there was always this block. Even when the Republicans had all of Congress, there was always this forced negotiation. Mm-hmm. And actually, this omnibus is not as bad as I was expecting. But yeah, the last 6 months have been difficult because the funding was supposed to be done by September 30th. This is the 6th government funding law that we've had. All of them must sign. So I've seen all kinds of crazy stuff that I've been documenting on my show that has made it into law. In the past few years, I was doing a lot of bills that weren't necessarily going to make it into law, but they were showing priorities. I haven't had time for that because there's just been so much happening, and it's really disheartening for me to turn on the news and see none of it discussed. It's all just being ignored. This has been a very, very active year.
Do you, when you do, well, actually, maybe first, what is the frequency and duration of your show for people who don't know?
Right now, all I can pull off is twice a month.
Okay.
And the duration is interesting. It started at 45 minutes. My last episode was 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Wow.
Because I went to Puerto Rico, and there's a lot to talk about there.
Yep.
But I'm also a listener-supported podcast. And so what I do is I have the main show, and then after that, for as long as it takes, I thank my listeners and I have friends on to do it with me. And sometimes we go off, like we talked for, I think, half an hour about the Boston Marathon bombing last week, just because someone mentioned it.
Yep.
So it's more relaxed at the second half of the show. And because it's a podcast, I don't have to make it short.
Right.
So it's all over the place. But the main show, hour and a half.
And when you are
the
researching like a particular bill, what's your process? So obviously you have a lot of source material you can go to, like for example, the congressional hearings and the text of the bill itself. But then like what other research do you do?
Well, I like to do the background because the thing is, if you watch a congressional hearing but you don't know what they're talking about, it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I like to look into who's testifying, why are they there, what is their relationship with corporations, you know, because you do get a lot of people where they'll say, well, this person is a professor at this university, but they'll be testifying about pharmaceuticals and they were a pharmaceutical CEO forever.
Sure, yeah.
So I do a lot of that backstory when I'm doing a hearing. Same thing with the bills, where I'll be like, okay, this is what became law, but where did it start? That's one of the things you're going to learn about the omnibus. It didn't start as a government funding law. So I do a lot of the backstory, and then the show notes. I mean, if you want to know my sources, that's the main thing I do. I think it's the most important thing I do because I'm just a person.
Yep.
So I back it up by putting everything in the show notes. So you'll get links to the provisions that I'm talking about in the bills. There's a way to isolate that. So you can double check my work there. I give you timestamps and transcripts of all the sound clips so that you can go into the video and find out for yourself what context I took it from.
Yep.
I also link to every article, every reference that I used. Yeah, the show notes are intense, but I just feel like that's super important to tell people where it's coming from.
Pat has actually double-checked your work, and he found that you had the ellipses in the wrong place.
The ellipses.
That's a stupid reference to
Happens
an
to the
Alan
best of us.
Dershowitz thing. It's ancient history at this point. No, I'm kidding. Pat found no errors whatsoever when he double-checked your work.
Actually, David, are you worried that Jen's going to do such a good job tomorrow that it could put your job as host of the David Pakman Show in jeopardy?
Yeah, this is something that every time there is a guest host, people will write in and wonder if it's possible that the guest host might somehow take over for me on my own show, which we've never figured out if anybody's actually serious when they say that. Like ultimately, I'm kind of deciding who's hosting the show. So how could someone take over my own show from me?
Sometimes
and
people
the
want me to
name.
do it too.
Like,
But,
how do
I
I
can't
take
do
over
that.
the David Pakman Show?
Right.
Do I have
Yeah,
to
it's so
change my
funny.
name
The
legally?
David Pakman Show hosted by Jen Briney.
Right? Like, how does that work?
Doesn't really make any sense. All right, let's talk about a couple stories. Do you like a good conspiracy theory? I'm huge
yeah.
into scams and conspiracy theories.
I just did the tinfoil hat cast, actually. So,
okay.
yeah, I love them.
I'm actually reading Flim Flam by James Randi right now, one of the big debunkers who debunks a lot of like psychic surgery, astrology, just a lot of really good stuff. Anyway, UFOs are a big topic of discussion, and there are British publications saying that it appears as though astronaut Buzz Aldrin, who was the second man on the moon, passed a lie detector test under strict conditions where he gave an account of seeing a sighting of some kind of UFO. And of course, this has many ufologists abuzz, for lack of a better term. But you know, the funny thing is that there's this. I've read a lot about UFOs. The sort of biggest picture for me is, number one, just because there's something in the air that you haven't identified doesn't mean it's an alien flying saucer, right? It's sort of like, well, we don't know something. There was something that we weren't able to identify. That's number one. And like the most interesting thing to me about the UFO conspiracy theories is, why would there be such a big cover-up? And usually the answer is because the masses wouldn't be able to handle it. If they knew that there had been alien contact, that there are aliens or whatever, people would go so crazy that society would basically fully break down. And when you think about it, you realize how on earth there are, you know, so many scientists that are working on the search for extraterrestrial life, astronomy, space travel. How on earth, if this evidence existed, would you pull off a situation where all of those scientists would be willing not to go public and never mention? What would be the incentive, and how on earth would you pull it off? And that's for me why I just think that fundamentally none of these UFO conspiracy theories really make any sense.
I think for the most part, the people who believe that aliens are in our general vicinity
Yeah.
also are skeptical of the fact that we even went to the moon too.
Oh, yeah.
So the fact that Buzz Aldrin is saying that he saw a UFO it kind of gives them credibility with their own theory, because they're like, even this guy believes the same thing that we do.
Which
it's
is
like he's buying into it
which
too.
is so dumb, because if you don't believe that he really went to the moon and you think he's a liar, then why do you all of a sudden believe him about the UFOs, right? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, especially when you look at where people go to see the UFOs. It's usually the desert, Nevada.
Yeah.
And as someone who loves to dig through documents, I can tell you right now that we're putting, I can't remember exactly how much, but it's hundreds of millions of dollars into a base that we're not allowed to know where it is.
Right.
It's somewhere in the United States. They're redoing the whole thing. And we found out over the years that a lot of these UFOs was the military testing their technology.
Yes, in the 50s, I believe it was, there were specific high-altitude surveillance balloons that could be up in the air, I think, for weeks at a time. The launches of those, we found out retroactively, often coincided with some of these so-called sightings. I find it really, really interesting. And in general, I do find the sort of cults that develop around certain conspiracies, because it says a lot about human psychology, right? The desire to believe a lot of these things and the sort of interest in a specific explanation, even if it's not one backed by evidence, is oftentimes more comforting than the idea that we just don't know everything, or we don't know everything yet. I think there's a lot to that.
And I think there's also a lot to be said about it's just fun to believe sometimes.
Sure.
You know, like I have a pair of socks that when the Patriots are playing, I don't generally like to wash them if they're winning. There's no reason to think that my socks have anything to do with Tom Brady's performance, but it's
Absolutely.
just fun.
And that's where, with astrology, I find it fascinating, where the position of the planets when you're born determines so much, even though because of the sheer distance of those planets, the gravitational pull based on the weight of your OBGYN has more of an impact on the gravity that your body perceives than the position of Jupiter. That's number one. And why are we ignoring all of the comets and asteroids? Like, only the positions of the planets matter? How does that make sense? It doesn't make any sense.
No. There's a lot that doesn't make sense.
Well,
But
that stuff's
believing
true.
gives you something to...
You like the astrology
I like
stuff.
that one.
Yeah. My mom at one point would buy, like, I'm Aquarius. And once I saw she had a book on Aquarius and one on Leo, which is my brother, I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? And she said, I don't believe it. I just find it interesting. And I think that that's actually true for a lot of people. Yeah. Most of us dream 4 to 6 times a night, but we forget most of our dreams very shortly after they end. It's hard to remember dreams. Sometimes you will remember a dream later in the day when something happens that sort of triggers a memory of it. And now there is some experimentation going on with the possibility of recording dreams. It's the stuff of science fiction in many ways. And what the exact meaning of dreams is sort of unknown. Freud had his ideas. Others have had other ideas. I mean, I think generally speaking, our understanding is that there is a sort of some randomness to it, but it generally reflects the anxieties and preoccupations of your actual real life. People who are not, I don't know, surgeons probably dream about doing a surgery and not having a scalpel way less frequently than surgeons would have that dream. Like, I sometimes dream about, like, it's time to do the show and the microphone audio is totally garbled and I don't know why. And then I pick it up and, like, there's no cable connected to it, right? I'm assuming somebody who's like a marine biologist doesn't have that dream. So there's some relation to sort of what we're doing, but the real specific meaning is not clear. And now there are discussions about, could it be possible to video record dreams with sort of neural interfaces and probes connected to our brains? And quite frankly, I'm not super interested in that. I don't know that I love that idea.
Yeah, it just made me really uncomfortable because
Yeah.
I think we're not supposed to remember them, possibly for a reason.
For evolutionary reasons, in some sense.
Evolutionary, and just sometimes you dream stuff and it has nothing to do with anything. So I think you'll just... I don't know. I wouldn't want to read too deeply into my subconscious.
Really?
I don't think I necessarily want to remember things that I forgot for a reason.
Ah.
You know, because that's where dreams come in a lot of times too, is it's you processing things. And it's just, I think our bodies are doing just fine.
And when you forget it, it's sort of, it's designed to have been
Good for
forgotten.
you.
Yeah. The idea here is an extension of lucid dreaming technology. Lucid dreaming, the idea that people can do certain things, and particularly with the help of certain lights or even taking certain substances, not like hallucinogenics, but certain drugs, that one can sort of become aware of the fact that they're dreaming but not wake up. That's the lucid dreaming community. And then coming from that would be the idea that maybe you would be able to develop a technology to get video recordings of this. I think there's a community that finds it super interesting, and then it's something that a lot of people just have no interest in.
I question the accuracy too. I mean, I'm sure you can test someone's brainwaves and tell that they're dreaming about their mother. But
You
are they
think
gonna,
so? I don't even know that we can do that.
But I don't think you'll be able to get it so like, oh yeah, my mom was wearing a blue dress in the dream, and then you play it back. You're not going to see her wearing the same thing. I think we'll miss out on a lot of the details. But I think it is pretty interesting because that's actually something that you lived through, and it's like you're playing it back. I mean, it's like, you know, watching your soccer match against another team for when you were 5 years old. It's like a home video.
It's the firing of synapses that have purposes that we don't even fully understand. I don't know that it's the same as just like reliving that great soccer goal you made.
Yeah, it's not necessarily memories either. I have a recurring one where I witness a plane crash. I know exactly where it is, but I've never seen a plane crash in real life, but I've seen it over and over again in the stream, and I wake up in it. That's why I remember it.
But you've seen video of plane crashes. Like, in other
Like
words,
all of them.
What I mean is your mind isn't forming a memory of something that you've never visually seen.
It's probably something I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
That's probably what that is. But would I want to have a recording of that dream that scares me?
Yeah.
No.
That's a good point, yeah. I used to have a recurring dream on the first day of school from like probably second grade through high school. And the dream would be that I woke up and it was the first day of school and I was exhausted and I got dressed and had breakfast and went to school and I was walking into school with my books. And then I woke up and I was disappointed that I thought I had already gotten through the first 3 hours of the day, the first day of school, and then I had to live it all over again in real life.
Man.
That was my recurring dream.
Yeah, I have one even now that I'm in high school and I have some like big project due for 7th period.
I have that
now
all
I've
the
been
time.
out of high school for like 5-6 years now,
Yep.
so I shouldn't be experiencing that. Maybe it has to do with like some stress that I'm experiencing. I think a psychologist would tell me that, but
Sure.
it's bizarre that I'm still getting that.
I have a similar one where with no explanation, I'm back in my high school and there's just this one, like I know that I have a bachelor's degree and I have a master's degree and I'm out of school. I know that, but because of some technicality, it turns out that unless I go back and do something in some particular high school class, I never will really have my high school diploma, which means all of my other degrees will be invalidated. Yeah. And I've had that one 5 or 10 times in different ways. And when I wake up, it really is a major relief.
Yeah. I definitely have that. I'm not ready for a test.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think I think we're all probably good students is what that tells me.
I was okay. I wasn't that great of a student, to be honest, but I just didn't take it. I didn't apply myself, I think is what a teacher would say. I didn't take it super seriously. All right. That's it for today's bonus show. You will be in good hands with Jen tomorrow. I will be back on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from beautiful in the sense that it will be warm.
So much warmer than here.
Las Vegas, Nevada. Do you know about Nevada? You don't say Nevada.
I say Nevada.
Right. So anyway, if you mention it tomorrow when you tell people why I'm not here, if you say Nevada, I will get a ton of hate mail. So
who says Nevada?
I used to.
Oh.
The same people who say Oregon.
Oh, that makes me crazy.
That's a bad one.
That's not the way to say it?
Oregon.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. All right. That's it for today. Jen, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.